Welcome to the African Youth Empowerment Series, where we speak on the role of African youth in developing Africa. Today we are here with former Monash SRC President, accounting lecturer, faculty administrator, and business consultant and entrepreneur, Mr. Robert Piri. How are you, Mr. Robert Piri?
I'm doing well, Tina. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Today we're here to talk about Zimbabwe and Zimbabwean youth. I wanted to ask you a few questions. If you see hope for Zimbabweans under the new leadership, if you see a possibility for change.
Yeah, I really do. I think over decades, Zimbabwe have been so optimistic. However, at some point in time, if you have checked, I appreciate that you're also Zimbabwean. If you have checked, there's a time where people's optimism has been cut, and some people, refrain from participating in the democratic processes of their nation. But if you've checked what has been happening recently, you realize that there's been so much hype into registering to vote and getting people to be part of the process. So such a mobilization of the citizens to engage brings me so much optimism and hope for a better Zimbabwe. And I must also stress that where there's no hope, there's no future. And I wouldn't at any point think there's no hope for Zimbabwe. I might not be sure when, but there's hope.
But surely with what has happened in the past, where we've had situations where people have voted, like the previous election, and we've not seen any growth and change in terms of jobs, that people might be a bit skeptic, even though we've had a change in leadership, that it's still the same party. What are your views on that?
Change remains change. And however, change also remains subjective. So to one person, apparently I would want to stress that when leadership changed, there was a whole lot of happiness, a whole lot of, jubilee, celebration from across the country, people celebrating one change. So change remains subjective. However, if we look into what has been happening throughout the elections we've had in our country, there has been change. But however, was it change enough to meet the expectations? It wasn't change to meet the expectations. It was just change to a certain extent. Is it the change that we desire? It's not the change. And I don't want to put across regime changes and so forth, but I would want to think that there's been change, but change not unto national expectations. And this remains a question, even when we're heading into 2018 election. People are expecting change. And as for myself, I don't care where the change is coming from, but the change is to be a national movement and for Zimbabwe, not for any part, but for Zimbabwe. Because Zimbabweans' plights and Zimbabweans' concerns, they have them at heart and they know what they want. Trust me, if anybody decides that they have to be a regime change, it is not because they trust the regime. It's because they just want to see how the other side of the coin looks like.
And that is true. From a business perspective, I wanted to understand more of the kind of change you would like to see, because from my analysis of the whole election process, it seems very clear that ZANU is going to win this coming election, and we wanted to understand, based on the new leadership that's in place, have you seen any moves in terms of Zimbabwe, in terms of business, that you would say are positive and are in the right direction? Or do you see, would you also like to add on to areas where you'd like to see us in terms of Zimbabwe go to expand in terms of business?
Yeah, before I comment on the business aspect, I should also try and respond to the part where you say it looks very clear. It's not very clear that ZANU-PF will win. But however, traditionally we know these are the winners because they've always been winning. So such an upbringing or such a background the odds or the tides will be so much in favor of ZANU-PF. But in any case, it wouldn't be very crystal clear to conclude the results before the election. Because if I look at the landscape, the political landscape as it looks like right now, I think I would want to say there's been some reforms where every party is allowed to do their rallies and so forth, where people people can relate, people can do whatever they feel like openly. But however, we know how ZANU-PF is in any case. But not to say there hasn't been change in ZANU-PF. There's been so many changes, and I'm sure I can congratulate Mnangagwa myself for some reforms to this end, which are not unto expectation as well. We're still expecting more reforms. But however, so far, I would say well done to the deed. Then when you look into the business landscape and see how the business has to reform, how the business has to transact, I would probably highlight a few things, but not limited to them. If we look into the biggest problems we have in our country is the industries are shut. The industries are not working. I'm sure that's the basis of the problems we have today. That's the basis that have seen people migrating for greener pastures. That's the basis of, that's the fundamental problem we have in Zimbabwe. And I would want to also believe that we don't have cash crisis, but we have industrial crisis in Zimbabwe. Because we can't have a reserve bank keeping cash or any bank keeping cash where there is no modus to generation of cash. People are unemployed because there's nowhere to work. So if I would hope for any new Zimbabwe, and if I would hope for any dynamism, changes in the industrial facet, I would expect to see industries being revived. And how do we revive an industry? For us to be able to revive an industry, we also have to think of how do we revive our energy sector, because industries have to be powered. Then when you look at our thermal power station in Hwange, for example, you go there, you speak to the executives, they will tell you that a couple, if not all, of course not all, of the generators are not working. And they're old aged. They can't generate enough energy for the country to be powered. I would want to see a country, Zimbabwe is very small, a country where the transport network is on point because, it's a small country. Very, 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 very simple things. I was telling someone that if anybody is to bring change in Zimbabwe, it won't take them a while for us to see changes. Because what we would want to see is cash in the bank. Our own currency coming back. Not the bond note, not the equivalence of any other currency, but what is our own currency. Not limited to these things. There is so many things that have to be revived. You come into the educational sector, you look at the textbook that I used in 1998 when I was in grade 1 is the very same textbook that a child who was born in the 2000s is using. So at what point should the syllabus be reviewed? Where are our researchers? Where are our professors? How do we cultivate intellectual capacity and say, let's teach what is relevant?
That is true. And to add on to that point of education, we have to look at the fact that we are losing so many people to other nations. We are getting a brain drain situation. And one of the things that we want to ask you as an educated youth, what can the educated youth of Zimbabwe, even in the diaspora, do to help improve the Zimbabwe situation?
I think it's very important that you're highlighting on that. I've come to realize that there's so many families living in Zimbabwe at the hands of the diasporans. We do send money back home every month. And in that comfort, trust me, our parents or siblings, they tend to cease to realize what problems they are facing in Zimbabwe. Because in as much as there's a cash crisis, there is me who's sending my mother money home. So if problems are to be discussed in a community, you would find that at one point in time, my mother finds the discussion irrelevant to her. So the diasporans, the brain drained, the people who have migrated in seek for greener pastures, they're actually contributing to the survival of people back in Zimbabwe. And we have seen so many cross borders coming to South Africa back and forth for the survival of the people in Zimbabwe. But however, if I get your question to be very technical, I would want to believe that you want to see a diasporan youth community looking into Zimbabwe and say, how do we develop it? That's your main concern right now.
Yes.
Or it is individualistic, because I'll put it across and tell you that from time to time, person A sends man home, person B does, and person... So already there is a level of transaction that is happening between the people in Zimbabwe and the youths that have traveled, abroad. But in any case, if anything has to happen in Zimbabwe, as a patriotic Zimbabwean, I would want to encourage every youth that we did not need to migrate to solve problems. If you're born in a poor family, you did not need to visit a rich family to make it. You need to look at your problems, face the challenge, and find solutions. I think that's what I would say. If ever anybody left Zimbabwe for educational reasons, acquire the education, come and apply.
Do you see a way for the diaspora to apply their knowledge and their skills within Zimbabwe? Because it's not just about money, like as we said before. We need the resources, the education, the educated skills that these people have acquired to be able to help the country in certain aspects, to be able to build industries, to be able to build jobs, so that Zim doesn't rely on basically handouts, even if it's from its own people.
Yeah, the landscape is a bit unfriendly to youth, as far as it is concerned right now. See, I've come to realize that, or I've come to meet people who are getting close to 40, and they are qualified, but they don't know what it is to work. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it is to have a pay slip. They don't have even a bank account. And these are people approaching 40. If they want to go to town, they ask their parents for $1, and they're approaching 40. People have lost the essence of what it is to grow up. You remain a child forever because you can't fend for yourself. But however, is it your problem? It is not your problem because your father is withholding the position at a time where you have to step down and you get employed and take care of them. So there is a generational division, if I don't want to call it discrimination, where our fathers, the oldest, they don't want at any point to retire, even if they reach the retirement age. So if you look in the employment distribution, that already is a problem. So if I can't fit in that system, that's where I will go to South Africa, where I would become a garden boy, at least because of fit. There is no person in Zimbabwe who's looking for a gardener. Why? Because there is everyone else. There is too much. Apparently right now, labor is the cheapest resource in Zimbabwe. You can get a professor, you can get a master's qualified student to work as a receptionist. Why? Because his liquidity preference is beyond normal. He doesn't even know the worth of his skills. All he's looking for is, if I get that little, I will do so much. Little. Whichever the case is. So you find that there is an equal distribution of everything. I don't want to limit it to wealth. One point in time, I remember myself telling a couple of guys that, see, there was a time when we were colonized by the whites. And that is normal. But we're living at an age where our fathers have colonized us and they don't care. What they are saying is, you are not working, go submit your CV, get a job. But little do they realize that the industry is saturated by old people. And that is if there is an industry. There is zero industry, and of the little that is happening, everything is in the hands of the fathers, the old guys. So where do I find myself fit? I'd rather cross border, legal or illegal, I don't care. For as long as that's where my bread is buttered, I'm happy. So in as much as I'm calling every youth to get back to Zimbabwe and apply whatever they're learning, I wouldn't want to do that without mentioning that, in any case, that's not going to be an easy hustle. It's going to be very difficult. But you have to maintain your breath and make sure you are dreaming. You are dreaming beyond employment. You're dreaming perhaps as an employer, because that's what is key right now. That is what is very important. And trust me, I think I will take you a bit back. I don't want to sound very political on this one, but it might look very political. I mean, when Zimbabwe was colonized, until the time they realized that this is unfair, the guys did not decide to migrate. They decided to face the giant. If they migrated, there were countries who could probably be looking for those people, and colonization could have remained like that. But what they did is they braced up, right? Breathed in, breathed out, asked themselves, should I seize my home because I'm ill-treated, or I have to make sure I fight for my right? So it is in comfort zone that we find ourselves having comfort in diaspora. Otherwise, we deserve to live in discomfort, and one day we realize what is comfort.
That is true. But speaking on your point of the seniors sort of holding top positions in companies within Zimbabwe, what do you think businessmen and leaders need to change? What needs to change in Zimbabwe to get the youth more involved? What do they need to do to really show the business sectors, the leaders, the politicians, to really show that they commitment towards the youth?
I think it is the control environment. The control environment has to be re-engineered. The control environment is wrong. So if it is wrong from on top, it corrupts going down. And when the control environment is such corrupt, it's not everybody else who suffers. I'll put my man on this. At a time where youth disgruntled, complaining and all these things, there are a couple of youth that are making it.
That's true.
How? They have accepted to be the distribution channels within a corrupt environment. And they know what we're doing is wrong, but that's where I eat. I don't care. So what should the top guns do? It is unto them to realize that within their capacity of holding onto positions, the country is stuck. We're sitting with people who don't even know how to write emails, how to use PCs, but they are holding executive positions. We're sitting with people that are as old as furniture in positions, but they are well like that. We're sitting with people where the Constitution has lost its foundations, has lost its ground because we want to further an interest of an individual. We have suspended Constitution for profits. There is always a mandate that when you reach a certain age you have to retire. It's not because you can't do it. It's never about active. It's never about can you do it or not. It is a principle. We're sitting with people who knows for a fact that if you serve your 2 5-year terms, you have to get out of office. But they'll tell you that I still can reason, I still can do. Then we have to suspend. So what happens with power is it accumulates. It gets sweeter and sweeter, and it becomes habitual. And when it becomes habitual, you get addicted. And when you get addicted, it becomes your character and personality. Once it becomes a character and personality, you can't dream or believe yourself living out of it and someone is in power. It remains a problem. The reason why our own father, R.G. Mugabe, is bouncing back is because he can't do without the power. Just that. It's not because you want to lead the country again. The power has been absorbed in him so much that he is nobody without it. So in 2 5-year terms, if you're a reasonable, patriotic, caring individual, it's enough. It's not because you don't have more ideas. When I left the SRC office, it's not because I was done. It was because my time was over. However dreams I had, and I did not implement them, that was my own problem, unless I hand them off to someone. That's all I can do. So it is that someone who have to decide his visions against my visions, at what point do they interact? Otherwise, he doesn't believe it. So it is not unto me to say, why is Mark doing these things? It's his time. We all have time, and time is a resource, and it's limited, it's scarce. But people end up saying, I need one more term because I feel like out of 10, I'm just 4 out of 10. I need to push, to the glory of yourself, not the country. So if we put the country at heart, if everybody put the country at heart, even those in the private sector, even the CEO himself of any company, they have to know there's a time to retire. There's a time you have to sit in the boards. There's a time you have to cease being executive. There's a time by you ceasing, you're creating ground for the youth. But you not ceasing, you're creating stagnants in the web. There are people who graduated years ago. They don't know what it is to work. It's not because they can't do the work. They can do it, but they have nowhere to practice it. You can see a graduated vendor in the streets. Why? They're just seeking. Some people have lost the work ethic, not because they are hooligans, but because they had no option besides to join the hooligans. So corruption becomes the modus in such environments.
I think your point on learning to pass the baton is a very important one in terms of infrastructure within the nation. This will really help in terms of implementing new ideas, like you said, about having executives who are still not yet using technology. In this day and age, we are living in a world where people can be globalized, and not being able to use computers is a big issue.
Exactly.
I think you've also emphasized something very important about, I guess, passing on leadership. But I think one thing I wanted to ask you is, are you a strong believer in plans that are built in terms of infrastructure rather than an individualistic plan? When I say that, I say let's not look at it as ED or the president, Mr. Emerson Mnangagwa, will rule for 10 years. Let's look at it as him building an infrastructure that correlates with different parties among common goals within Zimbabwe. And if that's the goal of it, he should be able to leave within 5 or 10 years very easily, and the party and the other parties within the nation can continue towards those goals, which are bigger than the parties, rather than have a situation where it's around an individual, in the sense of maybe in the previous regime where it really was more about Mugabe. Do you believe that is what will really make Zimbabwe a successful nation, building common goals that all parties sort of agree on towards, and directing all parties towards those goals and being accountable to each other, so that if one party seems to be failing to reach those goals, we can change it, or one party is reaching those goals, we keep them in power? Is that your view on infrastructure over individual leadership?
Yeah, I think I concur with what you're saying. Of course, infrastructure, I'll go infrastructure than individualism. The reason being, within any infrastructural development approach, you find that there's so much of remarkable, appreciative inquiry, where you have to celebrate ideas, where you have to celebrate brilliance, where you have to celebrate talent, suggestions from different perspectives. But if you have noted that African politics, I'm going Africa, did not celebrate brilliance. If every brilliant brain is rising up, it's a threat. So they have an elimination approach that is very, very, acute. And it's the reason why eventually, in as much as a ruling part knows that the people we are leading, they are not for us, or the government we are leading, we don't deserve constitutionally because people voted otherwise, they will always find a way to withhold power. Okay? They always find a way to withhold power. In other words, they are saying it's not your vote that takes us to office. We have our own means of going to office. So if we don't celebrate Edie's ideas, it's not about us changing him unless we reform. Otherwise, he has every reason to say, let's go for the election for the mere sake of going for it, but otherwise he knows where he's standing and he knows the results. So we go into an election that has been conducted before, that they've played their systems before. Politics, okay, we were born ZANU-PF, all right, and we still remain fed by ZANU-PF. And the education we've acquired is according to the policies of ZANU-PF and Mugabe's government. And we are here sitting talking because they made it work. But however, within the Mugabe's government administration, you'd realize that if ever they were going for an election, they would endorse Mugabe as their presidential candidate. But if you followed what happened 18 November 2017 last year, you realize that there was a lot of animosity in the party, but no one was ready to say, hello, I think this is wrong, let's do B. They were just following a train that is leading nowhere. In other words, I would say they were running nowhere very fast. When Mnangagwa was sacked out, no one joined him. It was a lot of some celebrating, some doing A, B, C, D, until the military stood up. That's when we saw now people saying he should come back and so forth. So there is a lot of unconstitutional activities that happen within our governance. I've always refrained from the political landscape. Why? Because how I think things have to be is a threat to how someone wants them to be. So once you put yourself out there and you want to be reasonable, you are a target. And the Zimbabweans are scared to engage in political activities because of that. Where is Itai Zamara? You get it? Mm-hmm. So in ZANU-PF, it's not only limited to ZANU-PF, in African politics, you find that we did not embrace conflict. Rather, we thought every time there is a conflict, there are conflicting arguments, then we have to combat. We did not celebrate dialogue. We did not celebrate discussions. We did not celebrate forums. All we want to do is Tino on my side, Marin on my side. What do we do? And that decision we take, the three of us, should take the whole country to be okay. We don't care. It's not a consultative approach anymore.
Understanding that we need to engage in more dialogue. Very interesting point. Where can people get in touch with you to sort of get more information on you in terms of dialogue, political dialogue? You really do encourage the aspect of Zimbabweans being able to communicate the issues to each other and look towards solving the problem rather than just fighting each other over it. Mm-hmm. Where can people get in touch with you and chat with you on these sort of issues?
Yeah, I think I'm available on Twitter and I'm available on Facebook. I wouldn't want to use my Instagram for politics because it's all funny and it's my social. That's my social platform.
What are your Facebook and Twitter names? Handles?
Rob Bob on Facebook. I'm Rob Bob, ROB, BOB. Mm-hmm. Then on Twitter, I'm Bobby Lashley, Bobby __ Lashley. Wow. And of course, even if you say Robert Peary or Rob Bob, you find me there.
It's a very unique name, Rob Bob. Wow.
No, it was around the times when, you see the hype in the colleges and so forth, and we were rising into the SRCs, then you just get a brand, that fun brand, and then it keeps you going for good.
No, that's amazing.
Sure.
We we wanted to just conclude with what would you think needs to be done? In short, what would you say needs to be done by African youth to develop Africa?
African youth should be at the core of democracy by getting involved. And I think our constitution allows us to decide who we want to vote for through the ballot. So in as much as we have lost hope in the ballot, there's no other way besides the ballot. So the youth have to understand, every African nation, there is always an electoral process. So every youth have to understand, in as much as it is not working, it's working. So we have to keep voting and keep voting and keep voting, as opposed to stepping back. Otherwise, if we step back, we are promoting what is wrong.
That is true. Africans do need to engage in politics, African
Yes.
youth especially.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today here.
It is a pleasure to know.
And thank you for joining us on another episode of the African Youth Empowerment Series.
Oh, well.